welcome back to the Commerce Collective podcast. My name is Emma Irwin, your host for this series. Today, I have an episode for you with one of my favorite annual recording guests. We are digging into PDPs today. You heard that right, because PDPs are so back. All right, let's re-meet our guest.
Yeah, I'm Russ Derringer, founder of Stratably, which is an independent research firm that helps brands navigate the omnichannel retail environment, how they do business with Amazon, Walmart, Target, Instacart, so on. We track digital shelf capabilities and trends, omnichannel trends, forecast the retail market, all that good stuff.
We love Stratably's research over here at Flywheel. And so because it's been at least since 2024 and maybe even towards the beginning of 2024 since we last spoke, I'd love to know, what have you been up to the last year and a half?
Busy as ever, as you know, being in this space, as we say, never a dull moment, whether it's retail media or more recently AI and chatbots, which I know we'll talk about. Just so much going on. So we continue to focus on growing our business. We launched an in-person event all focused on Amazon ads. We continue to expand our share groups and continue to just ramp up, more and more research across the space. So it's been a busy year, but a good year for us since we last chatted with you all.
Okay. A fun question that this one before we actually get into the meat of it. What is the last thing this year that you've purchased on Amazon?
The last thing, I knew this question was coming, so I looked it up. It was swim goggles. It was just a basket of one thing, swim goggles. I want to start doing a little bit more swimming, break up the running routine I've got going. Ordered it at, I believe, 9:30 p.m. I'm in Cleveland, so I'm not in some booming metropolis per se, but Midwest, average size city. Ordered it at 9:30. It came before I went to the gym very early in the morning. This is like magic. I mean, imagine if I had to go to the store to get, I just wouldn't have gotten them and I wouldn't have gone to the gym. So just again, I'm not like an Amazon fanboy or whatever, but it is fairly remarkable what's happened with shipping times. I know Walmart's doing great things with shipping times too, but just kind of amazing, still here in 2025, what you're able to buy and how quickly it arrives.
And I like that that's actually a story of like that then helped you go do something that's good for you. And it was like this thing that happened that then it was like, okay, I can actually go do the swimming that I want to do. And it's physical activity.
In the annual letter that Amazon publishes, I don't remember what year it was, but Bezos, it's authored by him, written by others, I'm sure. But, they talked about all the time savings for their Prime members. And there is a legitimacy, to that claim. I mean, the methodology, I have no idea. But just like as a personal anecdote in that example, saved me a ton of time, and couldn't have been easier. Now, navigating the 4 million different goggle selections on Amazon search results was sort of a different story, but I got what I needed. It was fine.
There you go. And thankfully, unless you go really pro, they're usually not horribly expensive. And if you can acquire more over time and test out different ones.
They weren't. Yeah.
It's been some time since we've discussed product detail pages on the show, and today we're not only going to cover a detailed state of the PDP, think what's working, what's not, what are brands actually doing, and does that lead to sales? But we're also going to connect the elements of a PDP to AI search because we all know that the LLMs scrape PDP content. That's not news. But most importantly, are brands actually updating content for this shift? You'll have to wait and see. So first, I asked Russ to start us off by level setting us on what's currently up with the PDPs.
Well, I think, here in 2025, e-commerce teams inside of brands, they're really fully on board that they need great PDPs to win on Amazon and on Amazon's competitor sites. They're spending a lot of money on retail media. So when they drive shoppers to these pages, they want the shoppers to convert. And so, at a minimum, when we think about PDPs, copy, natural language copy, great images, compelling videos, hopefully positive ratings and reviews. These are all foundational elements that, if we set aside AI for a moment, have been sort of the case for several years. But content remains hard to do, difficult to execute at scale. We've done some webinars on PDPs this year, and one of the findings in those webinars from that body of work was that brands, even brands doing PDPs really well, they're typically not doing every element of the PDP from the top to the bottom really well. So really every brand has room for improvement on PDPs. And at our event in the spring, we did this, like, it was in March. So we did like a March Madness Final Four kind of thing with different Amazon tactics and levers that you could do. So like AMC was on there and sponsored display was on there. And we had product content on there. And we didn't do 64, we did 32 different tactics and levers, and PDPs won. So PDPs brands from the brand, we got, brands were voting on, hey, what's the most important lever? PDPs were the national champion, so to speak. So everyone knows they've got to do it well, but it's tough to execute at scale. And I know we'll talk about this. Some of the things that you think are fairly basic and everyone's doing, that might not be the case.
I remember when I used to work with clients and on the client side of Flywheel's business, it always, like, for every large manufacturer, they treated PDPs like everyone knew they were important. And that was also 3 years ago. But I think, to your point, when now really everyone knows that they're important. But back then it was interesting to watch how brands sort of separated, like, okay, this sub brand, we're doing kind of the bare minimum, like titles, description, images, one video in the carousel. For like a premium beauty brand, you're going to go for the full PDP. It's going to have really beautiful content all the way through, that enhanced content, and then the premium brand store, etc. And some brands treated it just as like a price point differentiator as to what you put on the PDP. And then a few smaller brands that I worked on, it was like, no, everything should have the same amount of content. But that probably means that there's not a ton of enhanced content or A+, etc. So it's been fascinating to watch that evolution over time.
Yeah, really a series of trade-offs, and every business, right, has capacity constraints, whether it's financial or staff or, whatever the case may be. So a lot of times you do have to make choices, like that, like which part of our selection are we going to make sure has absolutely the best PDPs possible and all the enhanced content that's available, and maybe some others that are less strategically important. We don't do because we don't have the resources to make it happen. So you do have to make those some of those tough choices. I think what's interesting, and maybe partly why you wanted to do a podcast on PDPs, is that there is just been a greater sense of urgency or a return of focus to PDPs because of AI and chatbots. And what's interesting with chatbots is that, unlike, with retail media, it gave brands direct control over, if you wanted your product shown at the top, you could pay to have your product shown at the top. And now you don't necessarily have that lever, at least yet, in as direct a way. And so you don't have as much control. So your only control is to try to improve your content, PDPs, and then elsewhere around the web. And so it's like, oh, wow, PDPs are kind of cool again to dig into and to try to get right.
For sure. It's almost like it's just like a cyclical trend, almost, it feels like, and how they come back. And I'm like, oh, what's the next thing in 3 or so years that's going to bring the PDP back into focus? But I do love that in that March Madness bracket that you put together, that PDP's won because it's kind of like, okay, there are a lot of really cool things like AMC, a broader retail media, whatever, but everything ties back to, if you don't have your darn content where someone can purchase, nothing matters at all.
Yeah, you got to have it as a foundation.
Okay, now that we've given the PDP overview, I wanted to dig into some of the really cool research that the Stratably team has conducted recently about PDPs. We know they're important, but are there parts of the PDP that are more mission critical than others? Like, what elements of the PDP are actually measurable when it comes to trying to determine where to invest your efforts? So I had Russ tell me about this research that goes beyond just titles and descriptions, since we know those are mission critical.
So in terms of the recent research we've done on these topics, we benchmarked 229 consumer brand manufacturers across categories, across those dimensions that you highlighted. And we wanted to see the degree to which brands were actually pulling those levers, and then what type of impact those levers are having. On the adoption side, I think two things stood out as surprising that I thought would be worthy of sharing on the podcast. The first thing was video. So something like having video on your PDPs, highlighting your product and or your brand. If prior to this research, if you had asked me, what's the likelihood of given brands going to be having that across most of their ASINs? I would say it's very, very high. But the research indicated that only 48% of brands said they had video across most of their assortment. That was a little higher for non-CPGs. 60% of non-CPGs said they had it, 43% of CPGs. So, CPGs, everyday essentials type product, maybe there could be a case for less of a need for videos. I'm not sure I would, buy that case, but only 48%. So a little less than half, or let's call it half. That's something, videos is something we all know we need to do, but less than half are doing it. And I think even with CPG, the trend toward visual storytelling applies to that category in a lot of the same ways as it does for, non-CPG categories. So whether you're demonstrating cleaning or application or product efficacy or whatever, like we consumers are just so used to watching videos at this point. And what's interesting here is that if you can do video well and get it on your PDPs, that's an underutilized tool, and it's going to help you stand out amongst your competition. And everyone's looking to stand out on Amazon, right? So video video adoption, I guess, was a surprising element. The other one was reviews, but let me pause there if you have any questions on the video piece.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting I'm stuck on when you said CPG. I ate this little bag of Cheez-Its yesterday, so I'm going to use Cheez-Its as an example, as something like, okay, do I really need to see a video of a bag of Cheez-Its? Probably not. But I mean, maybe I just want to watch it open and hit the glass bowl and the sound and pretend that I'm eating Cheez-Its. But I'm thinking of what a missed opportunity to not upsell a larger snacking box with multiple different kind of chips. And what a missed opportunity to not just have that in the background, show a mom throwing snacks into a lunchbox. And it's even though you might just be a bag of Cheez-Its, but there is, and Cheez-Its might have videos on their PDPs. I don't know. I didn't check. But that's just me thinking through CPG or even cleaning products, showcasing other products in the portfolio and seeing them work together.
Yeah. And upsells is a big thing on PDPs that a lot of brands don't do. So I think that's a good sort of connecting the dots across those things. And, these are, some of the marketers that work inside these, very large brands or the agencies they work with. I mean, they're incredibly creative. So maybe it's a humorous thing or just an entertaining type of video, or it doesn't necessarily have to be super educational, because how educational could Cheez-Its be? I don't know. I'm sure there's probably elements, there probably someone would argue with me on that. I don't know. But, so you can get creative with it. And I think that's, an opportunity, and to make your PDP look a little bit more like a, social media page or something where it's just, it's just richer ultimately.
For sure. Okay. I will let you carry on past videos into some of the rest of the research.
Yeah. So the other element from an adoption perspective, we talk about the two other elements from an impact perspective, but the other element of adoption that was surprising to us was brands incorporating reviews back into their content. So only 19% of brands that we benchmarked out of those 200 plus manufacturers indicated that they're regularly doing this. So, doing things like quoting customer reviews in A+ content, or reinforcing themes from positive reviews, or addressing concerns from critical reviews. These are all best practices, but very few brands out there are actually doing that. And I think some of that speaks to just the ability to refresh content pages, regularly. I guess we haven't done this study in a little while, but back in 2023, most brands were not updating their PDPs more regularly than maybe once a year. And so I think that's, maybe part of it. But again, this is an opportunity to leverage. There's such an under leveraging of the data available from Amazon into your Amazon strategy, whether we can talk about, whether it's talking about product innovation, things of that nature. But in this case, the review data going back in to help support your PDPs in sort of a cyclical way. Very few brands are doing that. Again, an opportunity to do something different from your competitors. In this work, we asked about brand stores and premium A+ content, both items that brand teams inside consumer brands love, right? And we'll talk about brand stores first. Nearly everyone we benchmarked in this study, 9 out of 10 were using brand stores. So they had a brand store set up, but the impact on their business was less clear. So almost everyone's doing it. About 43% in our work said that brand stores were really, from what they could tell, moving the needle for their Amazon business. Balance, 57%, said it was unclear what the impact was. They're unable to measure it, or it hasn't had much of an impact. And I think that's interesting. I think in the industry, there's a sense that, and I do think you need a brand store, and I think you should really have a great brand store. So don't misconstrue what I'm going to say. But I think sometimes in the industry, people can get misled a little bit, like everyone's doing everything possible on Amazon, and it's all having a huge material impact. With content, particularly with content, it can be really challenging to measure the impact, and you need to have the right sort of, I think, expectations around it. We, in fact, did a webinar with some folks on your team around measuring the impact from PDP changes back in 23, challenging then, challenging now, and certainly challenging with chatbots. So brand stores, everyone doing it, not so clear on whether that's going to really move the needle for your business from a sales perspective. Similar story on premium A+ content, high adoption, about 75% of brands are using that. Of those using it, only a third are saying they're seeing a positive sales impact from it. Some brands are paying a lot of money to get access to those modules, although I think it's a negotiable thing. But some are paying a lot of money, but not really. Most are not necessarily seeing this direct line to their sales impact. The rest are saying it's unclear, or they're just not seeing it. So I think it speaks to that measurability is challenging. The other thing, to your point earlier about the Cheez-Its and like, do I need to see a video? I think that is a relevant perspective here for certain categories. Like a lot of times the shopping behavior on Amazon, it's spear phishing. They're looking at price and they're looking at ratings and reviews, and they don't necessarily want to go through the whole below the fold content modules and really dig in and learn about the product. Even the goggles I mentioned earlier, which is a little bit of research going on. I mean, they were $25 or something, so there wasn't a lot of thought. But even that, I don't think I really looked at the enhanced content. So part of it's measurability, part of it is shopping behavior on Amazon, a little bit different than maybe like a D2C site as an example. And so those two elements were, hey, a lot of people doing them. The impact on the Amazon business, less clear. We thought that was novel or surprising to some degree.
As you heard me say in the beginning, PDPs are so back. And that it's because Gen AI search has given them a new spotlight and has forced brands to rethink their PDP content strategies. So not only has the Stratably team done all this great research on PDP content, but they've also uniquely been surveying brands on what they're doing or not doing when it comes to adapting to AI changing up search behavior.
Yeah, so we approached this a similar way to those other levers where, again, everyone's talking about these things. Everyone inside the brands feels like they're behind on this. And we wanted to understand, well, is that true or not? And what are brands doing? And is it having an impact on their business or not? So for this study, it was a different benchmark. We benchmarked 286 different manufacturers. And we set out to learn, again, who's doing what and what the impact is. So for how much talk there is in the industry, only 1 in 4 brands told us that are updating their PDPs across, most of their ASINs, or at least testing it. So just 1 in 4, at least testing it on a subset of ASINs. So everyone is talking about this. Everyone is saying chatbots are going to change everything. And we're not saying it won't, because I think search behavior is radically changing and it's going to impact commerce. And it already is to some degree, even if we don't know the exact magnitude. And so everyone kind of knows like, hey, this is coming, but very few are even testing, let alone doing this at scale and really updating their PDP. So we thought that was, I would say, not necessarily surprising. I had a sense that it was something that maybe most brands really weren't doing all that much, but I think it's interesting nonetheless.
For sure. And I think of to keep us on the just topic of Amazon, but other retailers also have chatbots. I think a lot of brands would update the content if they knew what people were putting in the chatbot and actually had insight into the types of search queries and questions and whatnot that are going into something like Rufus. And it's like, yeah, if we actually had that information, we could more easily build it into our content. And until we have no idea what people are searching when it comes to longer form queries, how are we supposed to adapt?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, we asked brands what's holding you back from taking action, and that was a big part of it in terms of just like lack of guidance or data from Amazon. I think there's also this uncertainty around consumer adoption, like how much are consumers actually using? Because we just looked at Rufus for this study. We've got a benchmark going on right now on other chatbots, so that data is going to come. But at least just for Rufus, it's unclear, like how much volume is there, how much influence is this ultimately having? And then to come back to my earlier point around capacity constraints, a lot of brands are having a challenge just getting video up on their PDPs of their existing selection. So how are we guys supposed to take this on? There's not, magically, new staff that's here to like investigate this and, make these changes and then test it and so on and so forth. And so the capacity constraints are also a part of this.
For those 1 out of 4 brands that are actually trying to update their PDPs to be more AI scraping focused, like what are those 1 in 4 brands doing?
So it's multifaceted, but it's things like indexing and leveraging image carousels. It's shifting from sort of this view of like keyword matching to more intent-based sort of solution-driven copy. It's updating the copy more regularly. It's crafting those like solution first messaging. It's sort of just it's really ultimately in a sense what PDPs probably should be if we weren't historically trying to like game keywords, so it is sort of turning into hopefully a more natural way to display your product per se, but that's different, than the past. To help with this, we're doing a webinar with you all on the 30th of September with Mike O'Donnell from Flywheel to talk about your team's research, GEO, and how to not just do SEO, but do GEO altogether. So we're excited to learn from what your team's research has said about it, because it's a very fluid topic and it's one that every brand that we talk to has questions on.
For sure. You heard it here first, people. September 30th, or you'll see it on LinkedIn. But September 30th, webinar about actionable strategies that you can put into place. I'm going to wrap us up with this question that you also know, which is something on your digital wish list. What's on your digital wish list this year that just lives in your cart and you won't purchase it?
Can't remember what I said last time I was on here, but the one that comes to mind now is an electric guitar. I have a desire to just shred the guitar, but I have no musical ability. I can't read music. I've never played a musical instrument. I think I just like music, and it's like, oh, that'd be cool to do that. So it lives in my basket because I know I'll probably never really get into it and actually practice, which is what would be required. So that's out there. That's in the basket, but not purchased. Right. And I'm not sure when, if ever, that will be.
Wraps up another episode of the Commerce Collective podcast. Thank you to Russ and the Stratably team for doing the research that I think everyone quietly has wanted to see when it comes to what on the PDP actually matters the most. Spoiler, except you already listened to this entire episode, so you know. It depends. And what brands are doing to keep up with this rapid pace of change, or not. And as we mentioned in this episode, Flywheel's Mike O'Donnell will be joining Russ on a webinar on September 30th all about SEO and GEO, providing brands with actionable strategies that can help move the needle when it comes to AI and the content that you put on your PDPs. I've been your host, Emma Irwin, and I will see you next time.